Toxic management is a serious issue in many of our organizations. And so, as business owners, as HR leaders, it is crucial that we understand the warning signs to watch for so that we can build workplaces where our employees are thriving and flourishing. They can't do that if we have toxic or abusive managers leading them. So, in this video, I'm going to show you 3 sort of lesser known warning signs that you can pay attention to in your organization to identify when you've got a toxic manager on your hands. Hi there, welcome to People Ops Problems. I'm Leanne, and it's no secret that the people manager has a profound impact on the psychological and the physical well-being of the employee. And while the organizational consequences are much less significant to me than the effects that this has on actual human beings, it is worth noting that there are negative organizational outcomes that result from having toxic managers in place, like, of course, lower employee engagement and retention and productivity and efficiency and team cohesion and all of those things. So our employees and our organizations deserve so much better. But what is it that we want to be watching for as leaders to identify if we have maybe some toxic managers in place? The one thing I want to say before I jump into the list is just because you identify one of these warning signs or these one red flags doesn't mean that you want to jump to conclusions immediately and get very accusatory with your managers. It's more an invitation for you to start digging, to stay curious, to start asking some questions, and to see if you can figure out what might be going on with respect to some of these warning signs. So that being said, let's go ahead and jump in. The problem with trying to capture a topic like this in a short video is that there's just no way we can do it all justice, because there is a wide range of problematic or toxic, although that's actually less scientific of a term than I prefer, or maybe abusive management practices. There's a wide spectrum of that. What I want to talk about today are a couple of warning signs that sometimes executive leaders will miss because you're busy. You're going through your everyday routine. You've got your own, tasks to manage. And so you're maybe not paying attention to some of the things that are being communicated or not communicated by your team members or by those people managers that could clue you in that something might be up. And so I'm going to share 3 of those warning signs with you, and hopefully you can start watching for them in your organization. And again, not to just immediately jump to conclusions, but to stay curious and do a little bit of digging and ask some questions. So let's jump in and talk about these 3 potential warning signs that you should be watching out for in your organization. Okay, so warning sign number 1 is you rarely hear this person giving away credit to their team members. Now, you would think maybe that a toxic manager would want everybody to know how amazing their team is. But as it turns out, many toxic or problematic managers are much more interested in you knowing how great they are or how great they are at leading the team. And so this is one of the red flags or the warning signs. It's more about listening for omission, what isn't being said by this particular manager. So these individuals, these toxic managers, tend to over-exaggerate their own accomplishments or the role that they played in leading to their team's success. They also tend to diminish the individual contributions or the accomplishments, the successes of their team members. Now, they can do that explicitly or they can do that implicitly, right? So here are a couple of things to listen for. When you are hearing this people manager talk about their team, and maybe even more so when the team isn't present, so you're in a meeting, for example, listen for the way that they talk about what the team is accomplishing. Are they mentioning specific employees by name and giving away praise and recognition, making it known that these are individuals who are really contributing to our overall success? Are they mentioning specific people by name? Or are they speaking in very broad, very vague terms and emphasizing more the role that they played to get their team to those positive outcomes, right? Do they overemphasize their own role and diminish the roles of others? Do they seem uncomfortable even recognizing people by name? That is often a red flag for a manager who feels threatened by the successes of specific people on their team. So that is warning sign number 1 to watch for. Warning sign number 2 is that this people manager really wants to play a gatekeeper role. So this one is all about limiting access to resources or to people, or creating barriers for the employee. So I have found that in organizations where there's sort of toxic gatekeeper managers in place, these are individuals that often want to isolate their team, create a very strong in-group, out-group kind of distinction. And so they really overemphasize the need to protect their team members. And what happens is that leads to there always being a reason that this particular employee is not ready for that promotion, or no, we shouldn't consider them for that internal role, or oh, there's some other stuff that I'm working through with them. You know, if there's always something like that, there's always a reason they're not ready. There's always a reason they shouldn't be included in this meeting. There's always a reason they shouldn't have access to that information or those resources. If you start to hear patterns like that in their communication, it's often an indication that they want to play gatekeeper. This often happens when managers feel threatened by the potential of their team members, especially high performers. So listen to the ways that your manager talks about his or her employees with respect to their career advancement. Because here's the deal, an exceptional manager wants to coach and develop their team members and then see them advance. They want to coach them up so that they can advance and play a larger, more significant role in the organization. Managers who are deeply insecure, but often very grandiose in the way they think about themselves, they often want to diminish the role of high-performing team members and limit their ability to advance, to have access to other leaders, other departments. So some things you can pay attention to on this one. Do they always seem to have a reason why this person isn't ready or shouldn't be here or shouldn't have that information? But another thing that you want to look for with respect to this one is, do you notice that this team or this group of individuals, this working group, seems to have a sort of us against them mentality, right? It's us, our department against the world or the organization. If you start to notice that sort of dynamic developing, it's often an indication that you have a manager who's playing that gatekeeper role, where I'm going to create this environment where everybody on our team feels very loyal to one another. They feel very loyal to me as the manager, and everybody else is sort of not to be trusted. And that is an attempt oftentimes to isolate and to control, right? And to keep the team moving towards outcomes that really serve the good of that particular people manager. So this one can be a little bit harder to identify, but you want to watch for it in terms of the isolation tactics that they might use. I had the opportunity to help an organization a few years ago with an employee engagement survey. And one of the things that we identified was that there was one manager in particular who was bouncing around from one-on-one to one-on-one and really pitting employees against one another, creating some strong distrust even among team members to try to create a very unhealthy team dynamic for the good ultimately of that manager. So this is one you really want to pay attention to. You know, healthy managers want to give away credit, and they also want to see their employees advance. They want to see their employees grow and mature into more significant roles in the organization. So watch for that one. All right, so that was warning sign number 2. Let's talk about warning sign number 3, is that the team as a whole, or the people that report to this person, this manager, seem to be more manager obsessed than they are client, customer, or organizational mission obsessed. This is a trickier one to spot, and it takes a lot of employee listening. It takes keeping yourself attuned to kind of what the team culture is under every manager that is in your organization. But here's what can happen when you start to notice that a team is a little bit more obsessed, and obsessed may not even be the right word there, but they're more focused on their manager than they are their clients, their mission, or the vision of the organization, right? So what happens in this situation is that often because of the emotional immaturity or inconsistency of the people manager, those that they lead end up walking on eggshells. They end up having to be just very attuned to the nonverbal and verbal cues of their manager. So they're constantly having to evaluate, how to engage with that person. When should I approach this person with specific tasks? Oh, I shouldn't do it today. He or she's really upset, right? So there's this constant fear of getting yelled at, getting in trouble, getting isolated, getting a cold shoulder, getting punished, by having things removed from your plate or having more stuff put on your plate. So what happens is, because of that emotional inconsistency, and because everybody's walking on eggshells, a culture of fear and shame and distrust emerges. So if you notice as an executive leader that team members seem to be very, very concerned and very watchful of their manager, that's a clue that you need to do a little bit more digging. There might be something else going on there. Now, this is different from a team that is just crazy about their manager, that feels passionate about them, that wants to lead them, that they're obsessed in a way because of how wonderfully they are led by that person. What I'm talking about here is when a team is obsessed with or highly attuned to their manager because they don't feel safe in that environment. There's no psychological safety. There's a lot of distrust at play. So this one, again, is harder to identify just based on communication patterns alone. You really have to engage in a lot of good employee listening, holding your managers accountable. And on that note, in my next video, I'm gonna talk about some strategies that organizations can use to hold managers accountable and also to prevent this kind of thing from happening in your organization. So stay tuned for that. But all in all, what I want you to think about if you're an executive leader is, of course, there are the obvious sort of abusive or problematic behaviors. We need to be watching for those. There's those that might be reflective of toxic leadership. It could also be our fault as leaders that we haven't equipped them through training and development to understand how to drive positive outcomes for their team members and build a great employee experience. It could also just be, lack of great organizational systems and structures that we want to pay attention to. But I hope that in kind of listening to some of this content that you're able to attune yourself more to some of those lesser known red flags or warning signs that might warrant some additional research and some additional digging in your organization. That's it for now. I hope that this was helpful and engaging content for you. Again, next week, I'm going to create a video all about how you can hold your managers accountable and build just a culture of accountability around how we treat employees. So stay tuned for that. As always, thanks so much for being here, and I'll see you next time.